Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this special edition of Wonder Goal, soccer betting podcast from the Action Network. This is your fourth of 4 World Cup previews. This is a Team USA deep dive. In just a moment, I'll be joined by BJ Cunningham and Anthony DeBundo. My name is Michael Lieboff, and the three of us will suss out this USA team, make sense of the roster, give our favorite bets concerning Team USA, how far they'll go, their biggest strengths, weaknesses, how they shape up in the group, all that jazz. If you want to hear our deep dives on the World Cup at large, we have our Group A through D preview already recorded and published. Groups E through H are also recorded, published. Our team futures and player futures episode also recorded and published. You can find all of those episodes on the Wonder Goal podcast channel. Before I bring in BJ and Anthony, a reminder that Wonder Goal, this soccer betting podcast, is brought to you by our friends at Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Use promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 free. All right, gentlemen, before I turn it over to you, I'm just going to quickly give the odds for Team USA, the USMNT. They're 150-1 at Bet365 to win the tournament, 40-1 to reach the final, 12-1 to get to the semifinal, plus 450 to reach the quarterfinals. They're plus 550 to win their group, which is Group B. It features England, Wales, and Iran. They're even money, plus 100 to advance out of that group. And their opener, they take on Wales. They're plus 162 on the three-way money line. At the end of the show, we'll give out our favorite bets and try to make sense of the market. Trying to make you guys some money on the Americans. But before we do that, BJ, I'm going to bring you in first. The Americans announced their roster last week. What do you think is their biggest weakness in terms of their roster, their manager, tactics, especially in this group?
So, yeah, it's interesting in this group because if the U.S. was paired in a different group with teams like not Wales and not Iran, I would be more worried about the United States because what they tend to struggle with, and we'll get to this in the tactics, but the teams who have punished them are teams that can really get out on the counter and force those high turnovers, press the United States because they're not very good in what I like to call scramble mode, where teams are coming at them on a 3-on-3 or whatever it might be. They really tend to struggle in transition defense when they don't have the numbers to get back and get set up. You saw that when they played Japan and the friendly against them. Japan, a very counterattacking side, pressed them high, forced a bunch of high turnovers, and eventually scored a bunch of goals off of that. Now, as far as the biggest weakness is concerned in this United States team, I have to say it's the two center backs. Walker Zimmerman, he's a fine MLS player, but we are going on the world stage right now, and he is going to be going up, not necessarily in this group, but once we get to the knockout stage against some of the best attackers in the world. Is him alongside whoever we decide to pair along with him really going to be able to hold up over a full 90 minutes? I'm not so sure. Now, we have outstanding, midfielders that can definitely help those guys out, but that is what worries me the most about this team, about Team USA for this. We have outstanding wingers, like I already mentioned. We have a great 3 midfielder pairing from the 4-3-3, but that center back pairing is kind of concerning to me when we have to go up against Harry Kane, Phil Foden, Bukayo Saka, all of those type of attackers. I'm not so sure we can hold up. So that's the biggest weakness I see in this team for Team USA right now.
Yeah, Miles Robinson and Chris Richards are out, right?
Right.
Those two injuries were pretty meaningful, I think, for the U.S. because now they're down to what's likely going to be Tim Ream. And Ream has had a solid season in the Premier League thus far for Fulham, but
people just say he's the nicest guy. He's the nicest guy in the entire Premier League.
I don't know about you guys. I really think it should be Cameron Carter-Vickers alongside Walker Zimmerman.
Tim
I really
Ream
do.
has not been dribbled past this season. I saw that last week, but I think that's the biggest question mark too. That and of course the striker position, Ricardo Pepi and Jordan Pefok not on the team. I think there was a little bit too much overblown about them not being there, but I understand that the criticisms about Pepi, but I think that Jesus Ferreira has proven himself to be the best striker on the U.S. men's national team over the last year and a half. But of course, the biggest question mark with him is the finishing and will he finish at the rate needed? When you look at the shot production and what they've done when they've been on the field, it's pretty clear that Ferreira is the best striker though. So I understand the decision Berhalter made. What they do in terms of their what is their best 11? I don't know if they know. because a lot of it came down to them being injured for a lot of the World Cup qualifying. They had injuries constantly. They never had Pulisic, Reina, McKennie, Adams on the pitch at the same time, it felt like. And Aronson, where does he fit in? So there's a lot of question marks about what the best team is. I think that combined with the center back injuries are what I'm most worried about.
All right, let's flip that then. I think, you always have to kind of context it with who their competition is. And in this case, it's Wales and it's England and it's Iran. And if you can even kind of cross a line through England, they are massive favorites to win the group and even bigger to advance. So it's really 3 teams competing for one spot. That's Wales, the Americans, and Iran.
I don't know about that.
I mean, are there 5 teams in the group? Am I missing? It will come down to those 3 teams is what I'm saying for one of the other spots.
I mean, is England a guarantee to go through? Is my point.
No, I mean, I'm betting against them too.
Stop,
I'm betting
stop,
them.
stop.
I'm just saying, like,
They're winning the World Cup.
In that context, look, you can hear all that. You can hear all that argument in our other preview pods. But I think the question should be couched like this: is like, what do the Americans do, or what are their strengths that kind of give them the leg up over those 2 other teams who, Anthony, I'll put it this way, are the most likely competitors for that number 2 spot behind England?
I think that's the biggest concern too. I think the U.S. men's national team's best performances in World Cup qualifying came against Mexico when they were able to exploit space in behind, and when they were able to not be possessed with breaking down teams who are going to let the United States have the ball. Because the U.S., if you look at who our best players are, Reina, Pulisic, Aronson, they're runners, they're dribblers, they're not really passers. And this is something we've talked about when we touched on the World Cup pods during the qualifying last year. Like, they're not great. There's no clear player that they get the ball to play progressive passes. There's no person who you look at and you're like, that is an exquisite world-class level passer. But what they have are players who are excellent at running into defenders in space, who are excellent at beating their man on the wings, but not players who are equipped to play that one pass, the line breaking pass. They don't have the kind of midfielders that, a Spain or an England or even, like a lesser team like a Belgium has. So I think when you look at that, how do they match up with Wales, who are likely going to let the U.S. have the ball? I don't know. Like, are they vulnerable in transition? Do they overcommit? Do they get frustrated? What is the plan to get the fullbacks involved going forward? I think all these questions are really interesting, whereas I think they actually match up kind of well with England. Because England will be forced to have the ball. England will be the team that has to, make the commitment to go forward. And the U.S. can definitely exploit. And I can, depending on Kyle Walker's health, like you can see a world where players like Pulisic and Reina are taking advantage of England overcommitting or England leaving space up the wings, and we were able to run at them and get at them and create chances in transition. Where I think we're actually much better than we are as a possession side, despite Greg's efforts to make us a more possession side in the last 2 years.
Yeah,
I think
really what Greg tries to do from a tackle perspective, like, yeah, we try to be possession, but he wants the ball moving forward very quickly from line to line, like you said, Anthony, getting behind defenses. So yeah, when we play Iran and Wales, we're not going to be afforded to be able to do that. I agree with Anthony. I'm not really so sure. It might become a frustrating situation where we're trying to break down a low block, even if I do think Wales is an absolute luck box and has overperformed a ton. Like, the teams like Iran and Wales and even England too, for that matter, they're not going to press the United States highs. Like, the United States is really good when they can be organized in defense, because McKennie and Adams, even Musa, are outstanding defenders in transition. So, if they they commit turnovers high, or the center backs aren't very good at handling the ball, like, then that is where it becomes a problem for the United States. But if they can be organized, like, they can be very, very good defensively. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how it's going to fare against Wales or Iran, but we're definitely going to have the ball, and we're definitely going to have to break down a low block.
Yeah, it's kind of that age-old, question with the Americans. It's just like they punch up so much better than they play against teams that, like, of their equal or punching down, which is, you think back to like their famous results, like the England game, sure, like that Robert Green mistake was a huge howler. You go back to 2002 against Mexico, against Portugal, like it's been those teams that they've been able to steal wins against, and then they struggle with, like, the likes of Poland or South Korea and stuff, and then I don't even want to get into 2006. Luckily, Anthony, you weren't around for that, because that was a whole debacle. All right, it seems like we already touched on the back line. It seems like that is part of the concern and why maybe we're it sounds like we're throwing cold water on the Americans here. But the wing backs, I feel like, of this back, I guess the question for you, BJ, would be, how would you line up the back four? How would you want to line up the back four, ideally? And there should be some kind of success down the flanks with the wing backs, or the full backs. I mean, Anthony Robinson, by the way, former Everton legend. Don't sleep on him. I think he kind of gets overlooked in the whole setup, but that to me, is like a strength. I know that the spine of the defense is a little bit of a worry, but the out wide feels like the United States have what could be problem causers against teams like Wales or Iran.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Robinson is going to be the left back, and he is the right choice. I don't think the United States really has another guy at that position that can really do what he's able to do. He's having a nice season at Fulham right now. The question for me is at right back. Dest has been the up and comer. Everybody was really excited when we finally when he switched nationalities to the United States. He obviously played for Barcelona for a while, had some success there. He's made a move to AC Milan. He's only played 2 full 90s this season. Does Berhalter trust him? Does Berhalter play him over a more experienced option like DeAndre Yedlin? I'm not so sure. Now, I'm not saying that it's a big drop off if we decide to go with Dest or we decide to go with Yedlin. I think both of them are very fine options that can actually, that have a lot of pace, that can get forward. And like you said, Michael, cause problems down the flanks and really feed Pulisic and Reyna going forward. For me at center back, I already mentioned it. I like Cameron Carter-Vickers to be the other center back, because if you're looking at the options that Berhalter's bringing outside of Walker Zimmerman, it's going to be Tim Ream, who's now 35. Like we've mentioned on the pod so many times, Fulham's defense is terrible, so I'm going to pass on him. Aaron Long is in the bottom 20th percentile in the MLS for pass completion rate, tackles per 90, interceptions per 90. He's been dribbled past 10 times on 20 attempts. I'm going to pass on him. Cameron Carter-Vickers, Tottenham legend, Anthony, was really good for Celtic in the Champions League, and the thing about it is Celtic had 2 matches against Shakhtar where they were very possession dominant. They had to break down a low block. And Carter-Vickers was in the 99th percentile for pass completion rate for center backs. And he also had over 4 progressive passes per 90. That's what I'd want from a center back if we're going to have to break down a low block. A guy who can pass accurately, and is also very athletic, very fast, can help defend, whereas Walker Zimmerman is not the most athletic defender in the world. So I think Vickers alongside him, because he's, athletically, he's a lot like Miles Robinson. So I think he is the best fit alongside Zimmerman. So that would be my ideal back four. I don't really care who we got at the right back. I think both options are just fine. It'll be Anthony Robinson on the left, but I do think Carter-Vickers at center back is the best option. Or we can get really wild and play Tyler Adams as a center back, which we've done before, and then slot Aronson into midfield. That's the wild option, which I know we're not going to go with, but it is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a really big positive that Berhalter has decided to go with Matt Turner over Zach Steffen in goal. I agree with BJ with regards to, Jedi starting left back, and I think it'll be Yedlin at right back as well. Joe Scally maybe gets some run in a situation. Hopefully, I think he's shown some promise, and Berhalter's been kind of hot and cold with him. But that was my obligatory Gladbach reference. But I'm encouraged by Turner being in the team over Steffen. And I think this is a very interesting choice from Berhalter, because he's tried so hard to get Steffen in the team, because Steffen is the better passer. He's better with the ball at his feet. And the idea is that Berhalter wants to shape this team to be more possession-based. You need a goalkeeper you can rely on with the ball to make good decisions with the ball at his feet. And he opted to go with the shot stopper. And in a 3-match tournament, potentially more, I will take the shot stopper every single day of the week. Matt Turner was the best goalie in MLS in terms of post-shot expected goals for 4 straight seasons. Andre Blake up there with him, but Turner consistently was one of the best shot stoppers, not just in MLS, but when you compare him to the other shot stoppers across Europe, consistently elite. And he was a major reason why the U.S. overperformed defensively during the World Cup qualifying. If you just tuned in and dropped into the world and you hadn't paid attention to how the U.S. got here, they did have the best underlying numbers in CONCACAF based on expected goals for and against, better than Canada, even though Canada finished ahead of them in the group. And a lot of the reason was that the defense was very good, but the defense also overperformed because Turner was excellent. And they had some bumps in the road. They lost to a bad loss at Panama, a pretty flat showing in Costa Rica, but they had already qualified. There were some definitely ups and downs where people were ready to fire Berhalter, but they also had a lot of highs. And I think it's incredibly encouraging going into this World Cup that they're healthy relatively, except for the center backs, and that they're really young. And I think that's another advantage they may have here, is that their legs should be good. You're not a team you're worried about, players getting too tired or worn down. They are one of the youngest teams at this World Cup. So it's another encouraging sign.
One thing I'll also say is that, we didn't go to the 2018 World Cup, right? So we haven't played a real competition against the top sides, around the world. And this is the first time basically in the United States history that not only are we very young, but a very, very large percentage of our players are playing in Europe. And I think that's a major, major positive for the United States, that our players are actually playing against the best in the world week in and week out, and not just hanging around the MLS. And then we go to the world stage and then it's, oh my gosh, we have to play against the best in the world. These guys, even though we haven't played, the likes of a Spain or an England or a France yet, because we weren't at the last World Cup, these players will be ready. And that's the biggest thing. And it's very encouraging. And I think it also needs to we kind of need to, I don't want to taper expectations, but like Anthony mentioned, I think we need to recognize that we are very young and that we are building something really, really nice here that really sets up well for the 2026 World Cup. Obviously, I'd love to make a deep run in this World Cup, but I think we'll get to our expectations, but I think that getting out of this group would be a big accomplishment for this United States team, and that it would really, really help us going forward to the next World Cup.
BJ's already looking 4 years down the road. Odds makers, like I said, 50-50, they say, for the U.S. to get out of the group, plus 550 to win it. The midfield, like you said, you talked about the age profile of the squad, and the midfield is the perfect kind of representation of it. Yunus Musa's 19. Then Adams and McKinney, I believe, are 23 and 24 respectively. And that those three players, like you could argue that the attack with Pulisic and Aronson and Reina is the biggest strength, but without a striker, a true out and out striker, it probably is it ends up being the midfield. And the fact is that those three players are an average age of come out to like 21, 21 and a half or so. And let's talk about that midfield, because I think Tyler Adams will end up being the most important player for this team because of what you were saying, BJ, right? Like the center backs will need protection, and that guy is all action everywhere, covers a ton of space. And I think for you kind of alluded to it with these look back at the rosters from 26, 2010, you go to 2014. And, when you're talking about like Michael Bradley being the kind of talisman in the midfield, it kind of tells you how far we're coming, right? That we got these guys, because, and no disrespect to Bradley, who people have said, I look like because of our haircut, but it just kind of shows you the significant step forward. And I guess we should spend a little time on the midfield here. Anthony, I'll let you start because, you're the Leeds guy, and Tyler Adams is Leeds. He's a great New Yorker. So talk to us about this midfield.
Yeah, I actually just got my Weston McKennie jersey, so I'm very excited for the World Cup. We're amped up here, but I think Adams has had a really great breakout season at Leeds, and not just because he's playing in the Premier League when previously he'd only done it in the Bundesliga, but the fact that he is healthy and playing really well and has stayed healthy to this point, knock on wood. Leipzig, like, he was consistently in and out of the lineup, but he showed flashes of what he really could be. And really, it's just an engine room midfielder who does a lot of safe passing, a lot of getting on the, he's not afraid to get on the ball and make passes, but he's not going to, put a ton of balls in the box necessarily, but he just does a great job with tackles, interceptions, and pressures. Like, he's always all over the pitch, covers a ton of ground, can fill in the places like right back and left back when maybe players overcommit. Like, he's very versatile. And I think he is going to be the sixth defensive midfielder for this team. And I think he plays well with McKennie and Musa if they're going to be the 2-8s, because Musa is such a good ball carrier and McKennie's kind of a do everything box to box more so than the rest. And McKennie's so dangerous on set pieces as well. Like, I think there's a lot of versatility, and I think the group really works together. Again, the one thing I think you could say they're missing is that none of them would be considered like elite progressive passers. And McKennie has been up and down this year at Juventus, but he's already shown what he can be. He's going to be someone who's more getting forward, getting on the end of it. Like he's going to be more receiving progressive passes than he is going to be dishing them out. Like his passing range is still a bit questionable, I think. And that's really where the hole comes in the team, right? If Moose is going to be a ball carrier and McKenny's going to be getting in the box, getting on the end of chances and looking, more of that, where does the plus passer fit in? That's the one piece that I think they're missing. And one thing that could hold them back in these games against Iran and Wales. So I do love McKenny's numbers. He's at 0.2 XG per 90 this year, non-penalty, very encouraging. So I think there's a lot to like about all three of them and how they work together. It just feels like they're like just missing that one thing that could take them to the next level.
All right, let's just look at the forwards here. Then I think we could say that pretty fairly. Christian Pulisic is still the face of the team. Him, Gio Reyna, Brendan Aronson, who like Adams is having a breakout season with Leeds under American Jesse Marsh. With Ferreira, or if the son of Liberia's president George Weah, Timothy Weah ends up as the guy who he's 12-1 by the way to lead the team in scoring, which I think is a little interesting. Do you think the team has enough goal? I think it's that simple. Like they have the talent, like with Aronson, Reyna, and Pulisic, but do they have the finish, BJ?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you look at, whether it be Ferreira's numbers, Josh Sargent's numbers across, what he's doing at Norwich, like both him and Ferreira are finishing at crazy rates right now. Ferreira's 18 goals off around 12 expected MLS. Sargent with Norwich this season has 9 goals off 4.9 expected. So if they continue to finish at the rates that they have been, yes, then the US is perfectly fine. But I mean, that's the original question of who starts up top, right? Because athletically, talent-wise, I would say Timothy Weah, but his numbers at Lille are just not that of what Sargent and Ferreira are doing. If you look across, you'd be like, oh my gosh, he only has 10 goals in his career across Europe. And, he has been playing kind of in and out. He hasn't really been, featured fully on a side. Last season he played 18 full 90s with Lille, and he only was around a 0.27 XG per 90. So not encouraging stuff, but, he's a striker that can play well in the air. Is very talented with the ball at his feet as well. So, yeah, I mean, my biggest question here is I understand not bringing Pepe. If it's truly down to all right, we're already bringing Weah and it's between Pepe, Ferreira, and Sargent. I get it. Ferreira and Sargent are finishing at great rates. They should come. But why is Haji Wright here? Why is Jordan Morris here? Are you really telling me that those two guys are better options than Ricardo Pepi right now? I don't see that at all. And I mean, if we think about a worst case scenario here, if whoever we decide to start up top, and let's just say Ferreira starts the first match, it doesn't go well, he gets subbed out, Sargent comes on, it also doesn't go well. Well, then Berhalter's stuck. He has no options other than Timothy Weah, who for a lot of times throughout qualifying played out at the right wing position. Now, a lot of that had to do with the fact that Reyna was hurt, but still, it lends itself to the fact, should we be bringing our best 26 players who give us the best option to win in case we have that worst case type scenario? So for me, I don't really care who we start up top. Whoever we put up there, I think all three of them have their flaws. All three of them have their positives. As far as how they fit in the United States team, I think we're all fine with three of those guys up top. So for me, I don't really care who starts up top. It's going to come down to how good are Pulisic and Reyna at creating chances, getting the ball into the box, and feeding those three guys. Those two are going to be the keys to the United States attack on how far we actually go in this World Cup, or if we can actually break down the low blocks from Wales and Iran.
Yeah, I think it's got to be Ferreira personally. I love Tim Weah. I actually think Tim Weah has had an interesting season, in the sense that he hasn't played as much, but when he has played, he's been quite good. And I think that lends him really well to a super sub type role for this team. He's at 0.6 XG plus XA per 90, which is considerably better than he did the last 3 seasons, or the last 2 seasons rather, at Lille. Of course, like I said, the sample is super small, 3.5 90s, 2 assists. He has not found the back of the net yet, but again, over 0.3 XG per 90. I think he's still more of a wide forward in the end, but when Reyna, depending on Reyna's situation and whether he can play full 90s or not, I think he's an excellent option to spell minutes, because they're going to need minutes. I haven't gotten too into the, Pepe this, Pifak that, Haji Wright stuff, only because like the 5th and 6th striker doesn't really matter. Like how many minutes are they really playing for the U.S. men's national team? There's probably none, unless, there's like a desperation situation and we're probably already out by then anyway. So I haven't gotten too into that, but I agree, like on the basis of like, oh, it sucks for Ricardo Pepi that he wasn't picked because he probably deserved it. So overall, I'm a Ferreira person. Ferreira has not finished well for the national team, but like BJ said, he's been fine for Dallas. So I think that's the best option for striker, but it definitely is one of the weaker areas. I mean, you just look at across the board. I mean, look where our players are playing. I mean, Chelsea and Dortmund, Lille, and then in the midfield, you're like, oh, Juventus and Leeds again, Valencia, and then you're like, oh, FC Dallas striker. It just feels wrong, and that's the thing, and it kind of gets at the point. But I do think they'll be okay.
I think the biggest question also is like, where does Brendan Aronson fit in this team? Because obviously he's been in incredible form for Leeds, and I'd say he's probably one of our better attacking players. But Pulisic is going to be on the right, and Reyna's going to be Pulisic is going to be on the left, and Reyna's going to be on the right. Does Berhalter? I know Ferreira's probably going to be on top, but do we potentially say Aronson false 9? And
he won't do that, but I
know he won't.
Could
but
he take
I'm just
Moose's
saying,
spot is a more interesting question to me. I think there's more likely to do that than to take.
I feel like we need to figure out a way to get him on the pitch, right? Because he's been one of our better players across Europe this season. So yeah,
he's the kind of guy where you just wish he developed into more of a passer. And then you could take that, but right now, like, what's the production?
Right.
And
if we were playing a 4-2-3-1, like he'd slot perfectly right in the number 10 role. But again, we're not going to be playing that. So that's where it comes a little bit of an issue.
All right. Let's now wrap this thing up. Like I said off the top, the Americans, they're 150-1 at Bet365 to win the tournament. They're 40-1 to reach the final, 12-1 to reach the semis, plus 450 to get to the quarters. They're even money to get out of the group, plus 550 to win it. I think that for me, if I were to pick a bet, that I like the most here, it's to make a run to the semifinal would be the best value at 12-1. And it comes down to the path, right? Like, we like the Netherlands. If they finish second, they play the Netherlands, but I think England is a little vulnerable. Anthony thinks England's a little vulnerable. They win this group, things really open up for them. And if you're looking at long odds, like 12-1, just to get to the semifinal, you're asking them to win the group already, basically, like, right? Because you want the path to be open. And I think that if they do that, if they can find a way to win the group, then they're in good form already, right? So you can trust them to take care of who's Senegal or Qatar or Ecuador in the round of 16, and then you're asking them to win one more game as a 12-1. The upside's there. I think we all agree on that. I'll ask you guys this too, along with your favorite bet. I'm going to play the 150-1 to win the tournament. It's a FOMO bet. I just want the ticket just in case a miracle happens. I'm not saying it's got good value, but I'll be doing that. Anthony, so part 1 is your favorite bet, and part 2 would be, are you going to just have a 150-1 ticket in your pocket, or are you just a Scrooge?
I'm a Scrooge. Yeah, I will not be having any US outright tickets. I just don't see a world where they're able to pull off all these high profile upsets, but I do think they're high variance. I think this group is tightly contested enough that if you're a bit down on the United States, like 5-1 to be bottom of the group is not a terrible situation, because there is a world where Wales gets, a moment or two. And we discussed Wales at length. Like, the US struggles to break down Wales. They have a ton of the ball, but they're not doing anything with it. They don't have the passing. They don't have any space to use their dribbling advantages. And like, Dan James and Gareth Bale are causing problems the other way. And they concede a goal from, be it a set piece or whatever, and they lose that game. They're pretty big underdogs to get out against the England, to even get a result against England. England's, minus 180 on the money line. And then they play Iran on the final day, and Iran's an excellently compact defensive team who's going to cause similar problems to what a lot of the CONCACAF teams did to us when we did struggle to break them down, just at a higher level than some of those CONCACAF teams. So like, that's the case where this goes wrong. And they finish bottom of the group. 5-1 is a good bet. But I think the opposite extreme, plus 450 to make the quarters is a good bet too, because I think they have a pretty high ceiling, because we haven't seen this team play together that much. We haven't seen all their best players on the pitch at the same time that much. And we're going to see pretty much that in this situation. They're better than Wales, I think. They win that match and they get a result against England where they're going to be in the kind of tactical advantage where they're more comfortable without the ball. They get to play in transition more. Pressure's going to be on England in that game. They get out of the group. Now, all of a sudden, we're having a very different conversation. How do they match up with, the worst case scenario is the Dutch. And then the other scenarios include a situation where I would have them as a favorite. So I think, there's very fat tails on how the US go at this World Cup. And I think, those are where I see this going. I will make my official play. They will make the quarterfinals plus 450.
All right. So semifinals, 12-1 for me. Quarterfinals plus 450 for Anthony. BJ.
Yeah, if you listen to our Team Futures show, I did pick the United States at plus 450 to make the quarters, and I'm sticking with that. And to echo Anthony's point is that, we are even money favorites to get out of this group. And the worst possible scenario is we play the Dutch in the round of 16. The US is not going to be plus 450 on the 2 advanced line. They're probably going to be around.
Will they even be plus 225?
Exactly. That's my point, is that they'll probably
plus
be
160.
Yeah, something like that. So you could get in a very, very nice hedge opportunity, or you can listen to Anthony on our future show and take the Dutch right now to make the quarterfinals at minus 130. And then you're sitting there with just house money on that match. And you can root on the Americans to make the semifinals and not have to sweat a big time ticket. But again, yeah, I think we should get out of this group. If you follow me in the Action Network app, I've already bet United States in the first match against Wales, drawn a bet at minus 120, because I do believe we are a way better team than Wales. But again, variance comes in, variance can happen. We could end up drawing that match. So, and even if we do draw that match, I think the group sets up pretty well. We might have to be more aggressive on the final day against Iran, depending on how the Wales-Iran match goes. But yeah, we should be able to get out of this group. We are the second best team in this group. So plus 450 to get to the quarterfinals, where we're not going to be plus 450 on that 2 advanced line in the worst possible case against the Netherlands, I think has tremendous value. And it'll be a good way to root on the Americans and have some house money sitting on that round of 16 match.
BJ, will you have yourself in your pocket a ticket for them to win the World Cup?
Maybe. I do this a lot with FOMO bets.
Long shots don't win the World Cup.
I wait until the final minute, and then I just say, screw it, let's do it. Yeah. And just throw like $5 on it. So we'll see. I might be there by Sunday morning. But I wouldn't behoove anybody from placing a ticket on the United States to win the World Cup. But I can tell you this much, Michael, I'll probably be betting on them to win the 2026 World Cup on home soil.
That podcast will come out about 3 years and 10 months from now. All right. That wraps up our Team America deep dive. You can listen to this. You can listen to our other 3 World Cup preview pods. You'll see a lot of us over the next few weeks, as we'll be doing live shows. We'll be doing podcasts, writing on the Action Network, in the app, all that stuff. So make sure you follow Wondergoal in the Action Network app. Make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast so we can beat out our competition and become the best betting podcast out there for the World Cup. For Anthony DeBundo, for BJ Cunningham, I'm Michael Leboff. Go USA. We will see you in a couple days.